In the quiet outskirts of Houston, Texas, Emily Carter spent her days under the hood of cars, coaxing life back into machines that most people had long since abandoned. At only 22, she had the calloused hands of someone twice her age, and the kind of determination that came from growing up in a family of mechanics. But the real story began on a dusty Monday morning, when a general in full military dress stepped into her modest workshop. Emily looked up from the old Ford she was working on, surprised by the crisp uniform and the stern face. General Thompson had a reputation that stretched far beyond the military base. He was known for his no-nonsense attitude and an eye for talent. Rumor had it he was scouting local mechanics for a special job, one that was supposed to be impossible. "You're the one they called the engine whisperer?" he asked, his deep voice carrying through the shop. Emily wiped her hands on a rag and met his gaze. "That's what some people say, sir." "I have a proposition for you," he said, pausing dramatically. "We have a tank engine that's been written off as unfixable. None of my engineers could figure it out. If you can get it running again, I'll owe you a favor, but if you fail—" He let the words hang in the air. Emily's heart pounded. She didn't need to be told what failure would mean in front of a general, but the challenge was too tempting to pass up. "I'll take that bet," she said, extending a grease-stained hand. The next morning, a massive military transport truck rolled into Emily's workshop, carrying the battered engine. It was an old M1 Abrams power unit, its once proud metal now rusted and worn. Emily circled it slowly, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the damage. It looked like it hadn't run in years. Oil leaked from multiple points, and several hoses were cracked or missing altogether. Most would have balked at the sight, but to Emily it was a puzzle begging to be solved. She spent hours poring over the engine's blueprints, spreading them across her cluttered workbench. With each diagram, she grew more confident. This wasn't just about mechanics, it was about proving herself in a world that too often overlooked young women like her. That night, she lay awake, mind racing with calculations and strategies. She knew the risks. This engine had bested the Army's best, but Emily's gut told her she could do it. When dawn broke, Emily was already in the workshop, sleeves rolled up and determination in her eyes. She worked methodically, stripping the engine down to its core components. Each piece was carefully labeled and cleaned. She found parts that had been misaligned, small errors that had been overlooked by the engineers before her. As she worked, the general watched from the corner of the room, arms folded across his chest. At one point he asked, "What makes you think you can do what my team couldn't?" Emily didn't look up. "Because I listen," she replied. "Every machine has a voice if you're patient enough to hear it." He didn't say another word. Days turned into nights as Emily worked tirelessly. Her friends stopped by with coffee and sandwiches, but she barely noticed them. Sweat dripped down her forehead as she welded, adjusted, and tested each component. Her fingers were raw from the effort, but she pressed on. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she finally stood back and wiped the sweat from her brow. The engine was whole again, gleaming under the flickering fluorescent lights of the workshop. She double-checked every connection, every hose, every wire. Then, with a deep breath, she turned the key. For a moment, nothing happened. Emily's heart sank, but then, like a sleeping giant stirred from a long slumber, the engine roared to life. The deep rhythmic thrum filled the workshop, rattling the tools on the walls. Emily grinned, her eyes reflecting the pride and relief of the moment. The general stepped forward, his usually stoic face lit with a rare smile. "You did it," he said simply. Emily just nodded. She didn't need a speech. The sound of that engine was all the validation she needed. She knew this wasn't the end of the story. In the back of her mind, she wondered what would happen. Next, she didn't have to wait long to find out. The next morning, she noticed a sleek black sedan parked outside her workshop. A man in a sharp suit stepped out holding a thick envelope. Emily wiped her hands on her coveralls and stepped outside. "Can I help you?" The man smiled. "Miss Carter, your work caught the eye of some very important people. My employer represents a Fortune 500 company that wants to talk to you about a project that could change everything." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. She had taken a bet to fix an impossible engine. She had proven herself to the general and, it seemed, to the world beyond. But she had no idea how far this journey would take her. She just knew one thing: she was ready. Emily's workshop was still humming with the echoes of that triumphant engine test when she accepted the invitation. The Fortune 500 company's representative had left her with a business card embossed in gold letters and a promise: "We see your potential and we want you to join us." The next morning, Emily found herself standing in the lobby of one of Houston's most prestigious corporate towers. She'd swapped her coveralls for a clean shirt and jeans, feeling the unfamiliar weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders. As she waited for the elevator, she replayed everything that had happened in her head. The general's challenge, the late nights, the moment that engine roared back to life. And now this, a chance to step into a world far removed from her tiny garage. She was ushered into a glass-walled conference room on the top floor, where a team of executives sat around a polished table. Their suits were immaculate, their gazes sharp. Emily swallowed her nerves as she took her seat. "Miss Carter," began the man. At the head of the table, his hair perfectly combed back. "Your work on the Abrams engine was exceptional. We've been looking for someone with your kind of ingenuity. We'd like to offer you a position as a lead mechanical designer on a new project." Emily blinked. "A project?" she echoed. "Yes," he said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were blueprints for an advanced armored vehicle, an engine that would push the boundaries of what even military engineers had imagined. "We believe you're the key to making this work." Emily's heart raced. This was everything she had dreamed of. A chance to work on cutting-edge technology, to push her skills to their absolute limit. But she also knew what it meant to accept. No more quiet days in her family's workshop, no more solitary hours tinkering in the quiet. She looked up and said simply, "I'll do it." The project was a whirlwind from the start. Emily found herself in a high-tech lab, surrounded by the best and brightest engineers. But even in this shiny new world, she never forgot where she'd come from. She wore her work boots and kept her hair tied back with the same red bandana she'd worn in the workshop. She spent long days at the drafting table, sketching out innovations that no one else had dared to attempt. The project was grueling. Each day brought a new challenge, a new part that didn't fit, a new calculation that didn't add up. But Emily's stubborn determination never wavered. She stayed late every night, her mind racing with solutions. And slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. One evening, as she worked alone in the lab, she noticed a figure in the doorway. It was General Thompson, dressed in civilian clothes but still carrying the air of command. "I heard you were here," he said, stepping inside. "They tell me you're making real progress." Emily nodded, wiping grease from her hands. "It's tough, but I think we're almost there." He smiled faintly. "I knew you could do it, Carter. You have the same spark I saw in my engineers, but with something extra, the heart to see it through." She felt a swell of pride at his words. "Thank you, sir." He rested a hand on the new engine prototype. "You know, when I brought that tank engine to you, it wasn't just about the machine. I wanted to see if you could handle pressure, if you could look at the impossible and not back down." Emily met his gaze, determination shining in her eyes. "I never back down, General." And she didn't. In the final weeks of the project, Emily pushed herself harder than ever. She and her team built the prototype piece by piece, forging each part with precision and care. On the day of the first test, she was the one to turn the key. The engine roared to life, smoother and stronger than even she had imagined. Around her the lab erupted in cheers, but Emily barely heard them. All she felt was the satisfaction of knowing she'd done it. She'd built something that would change everything. The executives offered her a permanent position, a chance to lead future projects. But Emily had already made up her mind. She shook their hands, thanked them for the opportunity, and returned to her small workshop in the outskirts of Houston, because she knew that no matter how far she went, she belonged there. Under the hood of a car, grease on her hands, listening to the soft thrum of an engine she'd brought back to life. A few weeks later, she got a letter in the mail. It was from General Thompson. It read, "Emily, I wanted to tell you how proud I am of what you accomplished. You proved that real skill and determination can't be measured by rank or title. The world needs more people like you, people who see the impossible as a challenge, not a defeat. Never lose that fire. General Thompson." Emily folded the letter and placed it on the workbench beside her tools. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the workshop floor. She picked up her wrench and turned back to the old Ford she'd been fixing. She had engines to mend, challenges to meet, and a promise to herself that she'd never stop believing in the impossible. And in that quiet moment, with the hum of possibility all around her, Emily Carter knew she was exactly where she was meant to be.